Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you for coming to Leather Daddies and Goth Girlfriends, horror representation beyond queer-coded villains. A title I did not come up with, but is very good.
None of us did.
No.
Thank you for being here. We're really excited to talk about this really gay topic. But before we get to that, we have to pay tribute to one Jenna Stober who couldn't be here but came up with the panel idea, and after couldn't be here still said, hey, you queer weirdos should still do it. And so here we are. So thank you, Jenna.
Thanks, Jenna, for the bequeathal.
Yes.
So before we get started, I figured we'd do a little intro, let you know who we are, and then we'll start talking about, gay villains in Silent Hill or something. So let's start on the far end with WallE.
Sup, y'all? It's me, WallE, your favorite non-binary slime best friend on the internet, and I'm here to talk about just queer-coded villains and just enjoy
Wait, that's
this.
what the panel's about?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, I am so excited to be here. Thank you all for having me here for this.
Hello, human beings. I am Rachel Quirky Shank. I am a podcaster, performer, Twitch streamer, professional wrestling color commentator, wrestling acolyte, burlesque dancer, and in an a cappella group. I'm very talented, and I like gay things.
Multifaceted.
Hi there, I'm Jeff Moonen. I'm a podcaster, voice actor, because people sometimes ask what the difference is. There isn't, but you still gotta. Also, member of the same a cappella group that just performed, and burlesque dancer, nightlife host. I like to talk and make noises, and Matt and I do a podcast about video games called Fun and Games, and so most of what I'm going to be talking about this is in regards to video games, so that's where we are.
And I'm the moderator. I am Matt Storm, otherwise known as Matt, aka Stormageddon. I host too many podcasts and produce even more. I do other things too. I'm a DJ. I don't know. The pandemic's been 1,000 years and I forget everything. But we are all here to talk about gay villains, specifically queer-coded villains in horror video games, because for some reason, not for some reason, for a lot of reasons, villains in horror video games tend to lean into a lot of tropes that queer communities latch onto. And the first thing I wanted to pose to my panel was, why?
May I?
Yes, please.
Aha.
Oh, I know you're ready.
History time. So obviously we all know that history is linear, unfortunately. Time is a lake, but we perceive it in one straight line. And things sort of, influence other things. And a lot of the storytelling that we deal with, especially with queer coding, actually originates from the motion picture industry. In 1934, the motion picture industry, in order to keep Americans moral and upstanding, they instituted something called the Hays Code. And in the Hays Code, a lot of rules were instigated. Any morally corrupt behavior would be punished. Obviously, being queer could not be acknowledged. It was very much an open secret. And because queer identities were considered against the current moral grain, we often had to fly under the radar, which is why you see a lot of villainous characters maybe present more effeminate if they're male or masculine if they're female, always getting that comeuppance. So we've sort of had to skirt under that radar throughout. And before that, you sort of have the literary monsters, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, all kind of living in this sort of like shady moral gray zone.
And gay.
And so incredibly gay. Luckily, the Hays Code was abolished in 1968.
Well, unfortunately, by that point, we'd had 30 years of having to skirt around those things.
Yes.
And so you have plenty of up-and-coming creators, writers, directors, performers, that it's the sort of thing of fish don't know water.
Yeah, a trope is a trope for a reason.
And it's like, why are we doing this? Half the time, they wouldn't even notice it. And so we are still unlearning so many of those notions and ideas, because you look to an older thing, well, that's just how they did it. And oh, what a coy thing. They were being so smart about it. They had to. But we're still dealing with the ramifications.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where this all comes back to monster fucking, right? Like, we're all aware of that, right?
I want to talk about monster fucking!
Right? Yeah. So, I figured I'd get that out of the way. Also, yes, we're going to talk about Lady D, obviously. But, I think it all leads to an important thing, right? I'm non-binary and I'm pansexual, but does that define why I'm attracted to certain monsters? I guess. I mean, it's just kind of been this thing that's in a lot of popular franchises. I mean, you think about Pyramid Head from Silent Hill. He's jacked, he's hot.
Yeah.
But why, right? Why use that? Like, he could have been disfigured in other ways or whatever, but like, I think there's this want for horror creators to lean into queer tropes, either because they are queer or they've seen queer imagery that they think fits to their villains.
Also, when you look at like the inverse of that, also the nurses that accompany Pyramid Head, they didn't have to be the visual of pure sex and what people fetishize as like sexy nurses. They could have totally just made them these disfigured looking creatures, but no.
Silent Hill is
It's so
Silent Hill is
scary.
either not about the face or about a face that we aren't thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One way or the
So
other.
spooky, also so hot.
So hot.
So hot. But I think some of that in hypersexualization or hypergendering about things goes into, I think, something that draws people in about the queering of horror and the queer is the notions of it's sort of an exerting of worldview, and horror has always been an idea of grappling with what you're afraid of and grappling with the unknown. And Silent Hill in particular is absolutely here's a foggy town about what you're scared of. Deal with it.
Horror as a genre in general has been the carrying device of our fears and anxieties about living life. Like, it's why you find such an interesting dichotomy with US horror based in sort of like rural sections of the land because of this like forward motion through uncharted lands, but then in the UK you have this very deep fear of like what is urban because of like the winding streets. It's a delivery device for how we feel about the world. Horror, like it's why so much really effective horror is also about something. The Babadook is about grief, but it's a
Right.
horror film.
And by the same token, those areas where it's like the
Look at me, look at the mic.
You're
so cute.
I just like talking to you, okay?
I love you so
I
much.
love
You're the
you.
best.
You're so good.
Knock it off.
No, but, and I think something that works certainly in more modern horror, things like that, is the idea of things can be so much more. Like the idea of, flamboyance in horror in its own way, but. Which, you see the Babadook costumes, and it's its own kind of flamboyance. It's great.
Got him.
Yeah, got him.
Babadook, ours now.
We claimed that. We claimed Babadook.
Right. and that's the sort of thing. We can claim these things, and it becomes a matter of where you see yourself in the narrative of horror. Because horror by its nature, good horror, whether it's body horror, whether it's psychological horror, slasher films, anything like that, monster movies, it's where in the narrative do you see yourself? And depending upon how the narrative is presented, all sorts of folks under the rainbow here can either see themselves in the monster or they can see themselves in the people interacting with the monsters. I'm very much reminded of a lot of discourse that I saw about The Shape of Water.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Which is very much the sort of thing of, I saw some folks talking about like being interested in that by seeing themselves as, I want to fix the monster, I want to bring them into humanity. It's like, no, a lot of us see ourselves as the monster and want to be okay being the monster. I think something that works with those sort of creatures and those sorts of things and why it connects is the fact that when you are in a horror situation, you have to ask a lot of questions about what is going on. People in a horror movie, in a horror game, are like, this can't be real. This can't be happening. And you have to question the reality of it. By being here, right now, you have, at some point in your life, several points in your life, had to examine what is reality. What is, who am I? What is what's around me? Where are things okay? Where are things not okay? Where do things look okay until suddenly the knife comes out, metaphorically or not?
It's almost like you're saying the truth is fucking terrifying.
The truth is
Yeah.
terrifying.
It's the thing is to continue what Jeff said is that if you're in this space like right now, and I'm not even talking about this room, I'm talking about this convention, this space right now. You've had that moment that every horror monster has had. And I'm not talking about the moment where they turn around and they just go on a rampage. No, I'm talking about that moment where you examine yourself and you realize, crap, I don't fit here. I don't fit here, and the world, I'm playing the life on hard mode because I'm in a world that is out to get me all the time. And you really have two reactions you could do. You either fight or flight. And in a lot of horror movies, you see the monster reacts to fight because that's what they do. That's what they do to us. They're going to attack us. But it also kind of realized is that when you look at movies like Shape of Water, or I'm even going to go even further, when you look at movies like Hellboy, these are movies where the monster has accepted who they are. The monster is not going to change themselves for anyone. The monster is not going to do anything to match what everyone else is doing. In all those kind of movies, the person is matching themselves to the monster. They're meeting to the monster's level. And that's the kind of stuff that I appreciate when I see in horror movies. Is like, even if the monster's the villain.
Yeah.
I like when I see that the humans meet themselves on the monster's level because that shows such a huge change in the horror genre that it's no longer we're persecuting the monster. We're trying to understand the monster, before they rip out our throats or something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's just cranked all the way up when it comes to gaming because
Yes.
not only are you experiencing what the survivor is going through, you are making the choices of the survivor in the situation.
Yes,
You know,
exactly,
like
yeah.
we're,
You're
you
living
know, you press A to run, you know, like, oh, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the owning of the otherness, right? I think a lot of why queer-coded villains relate, and the queer community relate to those villains is because of we've seen what the perspective they've seen, right? Like all the memes of people running and falling when being chased by Lady D. Oh no, she's gonna get me.
Oh no.
Oh no.
I hope she doesn't grab me with those hands.
Please don't step on me.
Like, first of all, Capcom saying they didn't know what they were doing with that, bullshit.
Oh, they knew.
They knew exactly
They
what they were doing.
officially say that.
With them, and then buff Chris Redfield. Anyway, it's about the monsters.
Borrow Redfield, yes.
But no, it's fascinating, right, to look at how video games are presented now versus even in the old days. You know, think about the first Resident Evil and the horrible writing, the horrible voice acting, and yet it was still scary, right? The old Silent Hill
Matt, you're
games as
saying
well.
you're not the master of lockpicks?
No, but like I think that it's easy. I don't know if the creators are always leaning into the queer tropes or if we're seeing them because we've seen those perspectives before. And I think it's an interesting thing to chew on, and not a thing that I think we only see in horror movies or horror games. I think it's gaming across the board, even during horror moments of otherwise not scary games.
And with that, I would like to open the table to Undertale.
Oh yes.
Oh,
boy,
yes.
So like Undertale is one of those games where the main game is very wholesome and sweet and a little sad, but if you do a genocide run, it's a fucking horror game, without a doubt. And you're presented with these unknowns, and this character, the lead in Undertale, I feel like a lot of folks have latched onto as a queer character because gender is such not a factor, sexuality is such not a factor in that game.
And they go out of their way not to give a definitive answer as far as gender or frisk.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And one of the nice things, one of the reasons I love video games is being able to put yourself into the experience. And there's a lot of choices made in the design of Undertale. Whereas, we can talk till we're blue in the face about what the intentions are for Resident Evil or for larger games or things like that. But I feel like Toby Fox left a lot open for those sorts of things so that you can be a part of the experience and you are there. Who are you? Despite everything, it's still you kind of thing.
Your election of determination is constant. You continue to choose to persevere in that game. And holy shit, if that's not a queer fucking experience.
It is. It really is. And it just shows you that, and also kind of goes the whole thing of like, your choices are your own choices. These are not choices being dictated to you by someone else. Everything you've done in this is your own part, and you should feel empowered by that. Even in the whole, like killing run.
Yeah, whichever run you do, because I think that is something that I have enjoyed in more recent horror, at least more recent horror that I've taken in, and certainly in a lot of indie horror games, is finding the monsters in humanity and the humanity in monsters, and letting agency and choice play out that way. Because I think no matter what run you do, there is time where Undyne is scary. There's time where Metaton is terrifying in their own way.
That secret lab.
Secret Lab.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
secret lab is super
Oh, God.
disturbing.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just thinking, like, again, like, whether you do pacifist, whether you do genocide, whether you do neutral run, you are going to be chased by Undyne at some point. And when those tridents are coming down, it's terrifying. You have the warrior, the monster, this other coming for you, while you are the lone human in a land of monsters.
It's also the whole thing of when you do the genocide run and when you do a pacifist run. If you're a pacifist run and you encounter Undyne, Undyne views you as just this challenge they have to overcome. It's just this someone like they got to test their mettle against because like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. I'm curious about you. Let me poke you around a bit, see what your deal is. But then when you do the genocide run, you're put into a situation. You're no longer just this outsider, just happen to wander into this wonderful monster land. No, you are officially the big bad evil. And Undyne is treating you like the big bad evil. It's no longer a fight of, I want to test myself against you. Undyne knows you have been going around this land, killing every single person you have come across. You go into towns that are vacant because you have been killing everyone. They're not gone because you killed them. Maybe yes, maybe so. But also they're running from you in pure fear. And Undyne is the only person left as that line of defense against you, this small child. If that's not horror, I don't know what is right there.
Also, such an interesting way to approach sort of like, for lack of a better term, a non-binary nature of a character. You know, like Undyne's role in the story is as fungible as anything. You know, Undyne is either enemy to friend or the undying, the one who has to protect this underground. And I think that's just so interesting that you can sort of play with those very like wiggly ideas in what is relatively a simple game, you know. I don't want to call Undertale simple, but like one human made it. You know,
It got layers.
It's got so many layers. Onions are simple and they have layers, and they're delicious.
Thank you, Rachel.
And if you take away nothing else from this panel, onions are delicious.
Right, exactly. That's what we came here to talk about, right? This is the onion panel.
Now that we've got you all here.
Well, I mean, I think that it's really interesting when you look at games from other genres and their villains because there's been queering of villains that I think when I was a kid were less obvious too. I mean, we often talk about old JRPGs and like one that jumps to mind for me is a character named Flea from Chrono Trigger, who is a queer character that was meant to be androgynous, meant to be effectively non-binary or maybe trans femme. It's unclear, but like in the English version was like kind of unqueered. And then in the re-releases was given that dialogue back and given their identity back. But they're still a villain and you're still fighting them because they're an unknown monster in Magus's castle.
And it's interesting that it happens in Magus's castle, which I think for anyone who's played Chrono Trigger would probably feel that that's probably the closest to horror that, despite the fact that Chrono Trigger is basically a cosmic horror game.
Yes.
Same way that like Earthbound kind of is, but we're talking about Chrono Trigger for a moment. So it's interesting that you put sort of the non-binary character in the horror part of the game.
Right. Well, because the relationships in that game otherwise are pretty heteronormative.
Well, you got to remember, Flea. Sorry to cut you off, but
No.
like the whole big thing was that Flea did this because they 100% loved Magus. It
Right.
wasn't a thing of like Flea was like oh, I'm doing this because I'm loyal to Magus. I'm doing this because I follow their wills. Like no, Flea was saying I'm doing this because I'm loyal to Magus and I'm in love with Magus. And that was like a line from like the original text that got changed when it came over to the West. And it felt like when you got that line back, it really felt like, yeah, it adds more layers to this character outside of just the fact that, I'm just one of the three henchmen that supports Magus. No, each one of these henchmen had their own drives that they were doing all these things for. And the fact that they brought back the romance for Flea just made it even better for the character and just gives them more of a reason to feel connected with them.
And I think something that I enjoy in horror, and especially in horror games, is how horror can be an avenue for heightened emotions for just about anybody. I know the rituals are intricate. They're intricate, okay? And listen, being in a horror situation is a lot of times where things can come out and it's just like, well, if we're going to die, I'm going to say this anyway. Oh, Jesus. And you find comfort, and you find closeness, and you find everything else, which is why there's been a lot of just really good horror-themed dating sims and visual novels.
Yes.
Yes.
What-
Oh, gosh.
Thank you.
Yes. Like, like on a completely surface level, this is, I don't even know if I want to call this horror, but it's horror monsters. Let's talk about Monster Prom for a second.
Talk about that?
Can we talk about Monster Prom for a
Monster
second?
Prom and Monster Camp also, because both.
I mean, just the whole series.
I mean, we've got Vampire Daddy and Dream Daddy.
Yes, that's also true, yeah.
It's interesting to see how horror elements find themselves in non-horror games just by virtue of horror is such a fascinating playground that everybody wants to take it. I mean, you look at someone like Girahim in Skyward Sword,
Yeah.
like that game is not a scary game, but then Girahim shows up and you're just like, why is this the most terrifying tongue?
Legend
in
of
the
Zelda, why
history?
did you make David Bowie a slasher villain?
Effectively, yes.
Why can't I hit it?
And now
with my
you can't
sword?
unsee it! Join me! Not sorry.
Well, to bring it back to Monster Prom and monster fucking, which I mentioned earlier, like, I just see it as an extension of the queer state, right? Like, you cannot be straight and want to fuck a monster, right? It's just not possible. You can't be straight and want to fuck an alien. It's all inherently queer because of the otherness we talked about that society throws on all that shit. Like, I find Venom very attractive. Am I alone in that? Probably, but I've accepted it.
Oh, how dare you!
How many minutes
you don't-
into the panel before Matt said that he's really into
Venom, yeah.
think we have a full-
That is the
Someone owes
best
me
gay
$5.
romantic comedy and sequel that ever came out in the history ever. Yes, see? Thank you. But no, I think it all comes back to what we mentioned earlier, the otherness and trying to see ourselves in these characters. And horror becomes a little less scary when there are characters that you relate to, that you want to be like. I mean, I didn't see myself in Flea as a kid, but now as a non-binary pansexual, I'm like, oh, there was coding in this. I totally realized I see myself in this character now. And I think it's perfectly normal while it's easy to like look at the queer-coded villain as a stigma and a stereotype, which it is often, but there is things that we can reclaim in it too. And I think that's important to look at as well.
I feel like that just goes to the whole. I'm loving the trend so much that I'm seeing everyone just taking a villain that they see or some kind of character and just posting it online and say, that me. I love that meme so much. I love when people just find a character, just post and say, yeah, that me. And it's because there is something about them that they look at and they go, yeah, I relate to that character. Maybe a big thing, maybe a small thing, but there's that little thing that I just relate to them. Like, look at this. I'm dressed as Goro Majima. Why? Because I relate to Goro Majima. It's a thing of like, look, oh God, he's such a complicated character, that guy.
Yeah.
He's such a complicated character. But the whole point is this, is that when it comes to horror villains, we have so many people in the queer community just looking at them and going, yes, that me, because I've been there. I've been there 100%. I'm not going to want to, like, take over the world or something. Maybe I do. Be game, dude. But it's also, yeah, I've been there, and you just relate to that stuff.
Because horror is often a confrontation of true selves and false selves, one way or another. You put yourself, or put into a horrifying situation, a death-defying situation, life-threatening situation, and truths come out.
Yes.
One way or another. Lies are shattered, dreams are broken, and there again, we are all here because we're people who have made those confrontations with ourselves, and we learn the value of versions and personas and pieces of yourself, and so you pick those up along the way. And so it's not so wild to look at a certain kind of monster and go, no, I'm not an actual, like, swamp thing coming out of the bog. Maybe you are. I'm not judging. I'm just giving hypotheticals. But if you see a search for a certain kind of humanity, or if you look to vampires and you just go, yeah, I've given enough time, I would do just about anything. I want to sit weird, dress well, and what is it? I became a vampire so I could drink blood and fuck forever. And you know what? There's a lot of things about Laszlo that I don't want to do, but you know what? I'm on board.
That's you. I'm all for that.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so to find those pieces and go like, that's what resonates. You find the resonance there. And yeah, absolutely. Post the thing, it me.
Yeah. The other in me sees the other in you. And like, how connected and grounding can that be, considering that for so long our pride in ourselves as a queer community was kept from us, robbed from us, and we had to find ourselves in the hidden places, in the code, and now we're at this really great apex of culture where we can proudly go, oh yeah, I'm a vampire suck it, literally. Like,
I see what you did there.
Sometimes being covered in blood is the flamboyant look.
I'm gonna slow it down a little bit.
oh, slow down.
I'm gonna address the black folk in the crowd. Where you at? I'm talking about, let's talk about a little movie called A Vampire in Brooklyn, okay? Let's talk about a little movie about a vampire in Brooklyn and how that was very important, not just for the horror genre, but for us, black folk in general. Because that was the first time, not only did we see a vampire villain on screen, but it was a vampire villain on screen that looked like us since Blackula. Blackula, yes, give credit to Blackula for what they did, that they were the first on-screen black vampire. But Vampire in Brooklyn took that genre of the horror of being black. The black experience is what they took and made that into a horror film. Because yes, Eddie Murphy played this really awesome, charismatic, powerful vampire. But the real horror was not just that, but it was really just surviving in this world and being black. And that was like, you kind of look at it, if you look at it from that perspective, that's the horror right there. And then we turned around and then you have Eddie Murphy's character, who is a vampire, turns around and says like, okay, yeah, I'm black. I'm living in a world that's not meant for me. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to consume all of you, because if you're not going to help me, I'm just going to eat all you up. And that right there is such a really awesome thing for us to see on screen, that we got to see this powerful black person on screen doing all these things that villains that were very, very white, for the longest time, they were now to see have this power and the way just to move the world with their whim, because that's who they are. They're the real monster this time around. And it's very empowering for us to see something like that.
Yeah. Horror lets us engage with a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily want to do in the real world. The things that we like in fiction aren't necessarily reflections of the choices we make as people. Mm-hmm. That's important to say. And yeah, I think there's a lot of avenues. I can't speak to the black experience, so thank you for saying that. But a lot of queer experience, a lot of gay, trans, anything along the way. There's some point where you're seen as a monster, seen as a predator, and there is something joyous and rapturous and just going, fine, I am now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that meme of Peach leading into Daisy. It's like, have you ever had this moment where you just wanted to go ape shit?
Aren't you tired of being nice?
Yeah, like that is what horror is for us, for our community. That's what horror is for us. It's that moment where we can just go like, yeah, what if I wasn't nice anymore? What if I just started to be pissed off and like said, lash back at the people who will lash at me? That's what horror is for us.
And you get experience points for it sometimes.
And it's also a really interesting way to sort of confront this idea of sort of like being respectable or blending in or fitting in. It's like, why do you need that so badly? Why are you so scared of what defies polite society? Why do we hide it and subvert it all the time when we could just be out and be proud and be loud about who and what we are, who and what we love, And I think that's what's really interesting, because the monster has already transcended that and is like, yeah, I'm gonna chainsaw your face because I want to.
Yeah, I mean, whoever said that werewolves are not a trans narrative, it just isn't.
They're not paying attention.
I have
people talking about trans narratives say a lot of bullshit. Yeah. So werewolves are trans narratives.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
They are. That's people say weird things.
They
argue
literally
against
transform.
It's in the word, people.
It's right there in front of you.
It's in the word.
I think that all of these points are important to talk about, and I think with modern games especially, like going back to Lady D and some of the modern villains that are often have gotten the loudest response, it's instead of being afraid of them now, we are them. We want to be them, or we want to be with them.
Or we consent to what they do to us.
I want to be you and I want to fuck you? That is...
Yeah.
It's a thin line.
That's the bisexual experience.
Pansexual
And if you just do new game, you can do both.
too. Right. But I'm curious if any of the panelists have... The reason I brought up Lady D, is because she's just one of the more popular recent villains in Resident Evil, but also I wanted to bring up, like, is there a villain that you've seen yourself in? Is there a narrative? I mentioned Flea earlier for me, unconsciously apparently affecting me, but, like, was there a villain that you really identified with? You're like, this is the queer experience. This motherfucker is someone I want to be and sleep with.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
I mean, so I have a lot.
Yeah, I figured.
And this is one I just thought of right now because I've been rewatching the series entirely. Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Go on.
But specifically Perfect Cell. Perfect Cell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like, fuck!
Sorry.
It's okay. So for me, look, I'm not even gonna subvert this. I'm sexy as fuck, and I know this for a fact. And to see a character on screen that is just owns the fact that they know who they are. They know they are beautiful. They know they are powerful. They know they are badass, and they are unforgivably queer about it. Is so good. I'm talking about the Dragon Ball Z abridged version, how they lean even harder into it. How like Goku would just pretty much go like, look. I'm going to punch that handsome man's face.
Get over here and punch me in my perfect jawline.
I would never cheat on Chi-Chi, but oh man, that's a handsome man.
So handsome.
So handsome. And that's like, it's just the whole idea of just this character who is so confident in his looks, in everything they are. I just radiate to that shit. Oh, so we can curse, right?
Yes.
I just
Fuck yes.
radiate to that
I mean-
shit so hard. I love that shit. Just any character that is like that is so confident in everything from top to bottom, that's me right there.
And would you top or bottoms Perfect Cell?
Well, no. If like two Perfect Cell in general. Okay,
Let's
so
go with that.
I would
Why
bottom
not?
to Perfect Cell. I would top Imperfect Cell, and basic form Cell. Like, hey, whatever goes with that tail. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, you're not wrong. Jesus.
That was a very good answer. Rachel, what about you?
Wait, babe. Oh, I have to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go if you need a minute.
We could loop around and come back.
I just think a lot about characters that I love and would love to emulate. I can't. There's a lot. I'm non-binary. I want them all. Thank you.
All right, fair
No,
enough.
that's. I mean, to kind of dovetail on you there, WallE, because I have just recently, like finally, in the year 2022, finally started watching Hellsing Ultimate.
Oh wow! In the year of our Lord.
In the year of our Dark Lord, 2022. I've watched a lot of other. There's a lot of things, okay?
Oh, there's a lot of things.
You haven't watched everything I've watched. Don't down to me. Don't Crunchyroll shame me, okay? Jesus. And again, I started watching it because I watched all of Hellsing Ultimate Abridged and loved it, and it was incredible. I'm like, you know what? I got some time. I'm alone. I'm gonna watch this shit. And god damn it, Alucard.
I got one.
Like all versions, all forms. Literally, like whatever version of the anime it is, and whatever version Alucard takes.
It's also a thing is if you watch Hellsing and you love the series, guess what? I'm sorry, but you're a Switch. You are a Switch.
I own it.
Rules.
I have concocted one in particular, and I'm gonna bring it back here. I'm gonna go Zagreus.
Yeah.
Hades.
Yep.
Definitely. Yeah.
Want to be him. Want to be with him. Also, I know that this is particularly branded toward like horror as a gaming genre, but again, like death is scary. Whatever, that's a very spooky game, I'd say. But a great moment of representation for spoilers, light spoilers for Hades if you haven't played. If you haven't played, shame on you. There's an option to be poly in it, and it is so simple. It is so fascinating. And I've played a lot of games where it's almost like they can almost allow you to be poly, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can't date all the farm people in Stardew Valley.
That's very specific.
You're a disaster.
Listen.
Like, you're not allowed. But then just something like Zagreus being able to pursue romance through multiple avenues without any fear or shame. And frankly, encouragement from the lovers in question is so fascinating. So yeah, I like Zagreus. I want to kiss Zagreus. And everybody that Zagreus wants to kiss, I want to kiss them too.
Also, we also appreciate
Them
that
Furies.
they lean so hard into the battle partners trope of the battle romance.
Oh, yeah.
I love that trope.
Ooh,
I love
come
that
on.
trope. Yeah.
Look at me. I do pro wrestling. I love the
Yeah.
sexual nature of fighting.
I love that trope so much.
I mean, fighting is inherently sexual.
Oh, it's totally.
It is. It is. And anyone says otherwise is a
Bodies.
coward.
Sorry.
You get sweaty.
There is contact.
There's
The rituals. The rituals. But
intimacy.
But also to something you said, Rachel, the idea of whether it counts as horror or not.
Yeah.
I feel as though, for gaming certainly, horror as a genre for gaming is a bit of a misnomer. Because it's the kind of thing of like, well, what is horror gameplay versus horror narrative? And a lot of games, certainly nowadays, there are wide and open world and systems stacked on top of systems and quests within quests. They allow you, certainly in larger games, to choose to engage in the corners of it that are horror. There's endings that go horrifying, like to Undertale. You can go pacifist, you can go genocide. You can choose to be the monster. You can choose to have things be horror. And so there's plenty of things out there that they may not be called a horror game, but they do. I mean, talking about like Skyward Sword, there's moments of horror in that. And I think that works.
Yeah, like Stray? Are you kidding me?
Oh, Stray, yeah.
Terrifying.
Real. Ooh.
Absolutely horrifying in moments.
Yeah.
Because you're just a tiny cat.
Just a tiny
Little
cat.
guy. You're just a little guy. Is what you
Just
are.
little baby.
And there's something, also to take a moment with Stray, and like, yes, there's some horror moments in that, and there is something about the gendered and non-binary through line of automatons
Yeah.
that happen in Stray, that happen in a lot of games, that happen, to Metaton in Undertale and a lot of other things that I am running on so much adrenaline right now that I'm just blanking on examples if I didn't write them down, that are another aspect of othering, but also it's what we've got, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I think the coolest thing about gaming in general is that you can see yourself in so many different ways now. There's so much power given back to the player, not quite enough yet, but still more than we had. I often think about the game Boyfriend Dungeon and how blatantly it displays sexuality, talking about being locked into relationships. You can date everyone or no one in that game and anywhere in between, and no one judges you, and it's a perfect world that doesn't really exist.
Because the Ace and Arrow experience is the queer experience as well.
Right.
And it needs to be.
Yes.
It always must be said, damn it.
Yeah.
It has to be.
But, and I think, like, just going back to where we see ourselves, obviously I've already mentioned Venom several times, but, like, I saw myself in that character growing up.
I hope you all brought bingo cards. for
Right?
that,
Keep track.
guys.
I know the audience at home listening is.
Next time, we're going to do that.
But no, I mean, he was a complete mess of a human who didn't know which way was straight in a lot of ways. And it was just a character reading comics as a kid. I was like, oh, he's a cool alien who could beat people up. He's also really challenged and doesn't know what he's doing and really wants this one guy for inexplicable reasons to go to the ends of the earth for this one hero, but doesn't love him, but definitely does love him. It's easy to see yourself in those experiences. And I think that ultimately, the thesis, I guess, of this panel was the idea of identifying queer-coded villains in horror games, but then even beyond that, just queer-coded characters, and that there's so much more of them now than there were. There still could be more, definitely more diverse races and genders, not just genders or non-genders or sexualities, non-sexualities, all of that. And I think that we have to keep demanding. Geoff talked about we had to hide ourselves. We had to not be ourselves. But I think these villains, if nothing else, we identify with because they are unabashedly themselves. And that's a lesson that we can all take for ourselves, is to be ourselves. Like, fuck everyone else. They don't get to dictate who we are. We do. And that's
Essentially.
I'd also like to say that I wasn't expecting to think about this conclusion, but even the genre of horror is not a binary. Like, we've really
Right.
approached a lot of pieces like this has some horror elements. It's almost like genre is a spectrum.
Everything's a spectrum.
Everything's a spectrum. Except for Spectrum. That service stinks.
Yeah, they are.
Bum, ba-dum, bum.
Not a sponsor.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I did want to, before we wrapped up, open the floor for questions. If you have questions, there's a microphone. Since we are recording this for an episode of Fun and Games, I would love for y'all to line up at the microphone and ask your questions. We've got probably about 5 to 8 minutes for that. Then we'll neatly tell you where you can find all of us on the internet, because we're all marketing all the time forever. And then we can wrap up the panel.
The grind never
Yeah,
ends.
there's,
come
there's,
on.
Yes, please, don't be
there's
shy.
no visual recording going on, so if you want to like walk in front of things, however you want to line up.
Yeah,
and
it's all audio.
Yeah.
left.
So seeing the spectrum of the genre and how like queer experience and horror, I was wondering if you could share some thoughts on Gone Home and how that played with horror gaming tropes and a queer narrative.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, that's the one where you like explore the house.
Yes,
you
you
didn't
explore
live
your
in the
house.
house.
No, you didn't live it, but you're walking around it.
Oh my gosh, it's so
When
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out
Yeah.
your sister. And
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, just like the fear of isolation, like being alone with your thoughts and in a strange environment. I mean, it's that feeling of like entering a new space with your identity intact and going, okay, I don't know what variables are going to be here. Like, how much of myself do I put forward? Like, that's such an interesting game to think. I hadn't even thought about it, but like that idea of not only being alone with your thoughts, but also trying to determine how much of yourself you give in a new environment, in a new space, in a new scenario. Like,
It feels like a game like that is the horror of not of a physical being there. It's the horror of anxiety that we all deal with. It's that anxiety of the unknown, of that anxiety of, oh crap, I gotta adjust my life to something that I have no idea what I'm dealing with. And I don't know about you, but that's horrifying for me.
Yeah, and it also goes to, there's so much in horror of that moment of like something appears human until the fangs, until the tentacles, until the whatever. And the
Everyone's a
idea
party.
of, but it's also a thing of environment, of spaces, of yes, people, but the notion of people, where once seemed fine, where once was fine, until it's not.
the notion of people, terrifying.
Terrifying. Hate
Absolutely
people.
blood curdling.
Except you people. We love you people, but not people.
No, I need to get in front of people all the time, and I hate it. It's just this. I need this, please.
Yeah.
This is my existential hell. I love you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, come on up.
I love all the points y'all are making about the relatability and just the emotional catharsis you can get from something that's not normally enjoyable like horror genre. The question I had for y'all, what are y'all individuals' scariest games or movies? What scared you the most?
Oh boy.
Okay, so for me, I have an easy answer for this because I subjected my followers on Twitch to it. I had never played Dead Space until last year, and I played it on stream, and fuck if that's not the scariest game I've ever played. But it was actually really cathartic to play with an audience. It's so much fun. I'm looking forward to the remake, but that game... That said, also, you can find a clip on my Twitch channel now of me jumping in the Resident Evil 2 remake to someone falling out of a locker. Literally not, it's just a dead body in a locker, and I jumped 10 feet out of my chair.
So this is an old one, but it's the one that leaps to mind. I remember the first time I played Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. There we go. A friend and I rented it from Blockbuster. I'm just gonna like layer the olds here, and set it up. It was like Friday night, whatever. We start playing. We're going. It's around like 1 a.m, and we checked the bathtub. And if you've played Eternal Darkness, you know exactly what bathtub we're talking about. It was a hell of a jump scare, hell of a thing. Yes, and as far as psychological horror goes, delightful. And that was we got another couple hours of game in us. We're not going to sleep. Which is funny, because I'm normally not a big jump scare human, and I'm usually a lot more creeped out by like really wild body horror. Like, to go to Straight for a moment, the eyes got me.
Yeah.
No.
The eyes.
Nope.
Just eyes where they should not be.
Yeah, why? Why would you make this choice? This is just about a sweet little kitty with a vest.
Which is great. And I think there's that incongruity. Like, you expect certain types of danger, you expect certain types of things. I was used to things jumping out at me, things chasing me. It's those twists. It's the safety going away.
Oh, yeah.
You go into a horror situation as a viewer of media, as a player of games, going, all right, I accept this level of horror. And then sometimes they bust some stuff out at you. Those are always the good ones.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I would say that my particular brand of horror kink is that sort of existential kind of dread. The stuff that lingers with you for a long time. Also, I love when a horror game is like hiding behind a really cute visual novel. I'm talking about Doki Doki Literature Club.
Yeah.
I can still feel my blood run cold when suddenly Yuri has the knife and I'm just like, no, please don't do this, please don't do this. And just this idea of turning this genre on its head of just, what if these characters were real and existed and had agency, and you use them for your own romantic interest, your own titillation. I think that's such an interesting piece. Also, just like its meta narrative within, also super haunting. I think that's a really interesting piece of, yes, this is very scary and gory and all of that, but like you walk away from it and you go, in the same way with Undertale, like, do these characters that we made up of pixels have a soul? And if so, am I a bad person for playing their game? Like,
Meta bites
Yes.
back.
you just have to live with that and go, I've made the choice to play games online, so sorry. Horrifying.
For me, the genre of horror that always, without fail, will creep me out is when I'm powerless completely and I have to make it from point A to point B and I know everything out there is out to get me. That's why Limbo will no matter what. I've played that game maybe 10 times and it's still, every jump scare still like unnerves me. Like the fact that everything is silent and it's just silhouettes and shadows and oh gosh, just the freaking spider legs out of nowhere just grab it. Then there's the fake spider legs. It is just unnerving of a game. And also because anything that are giants freak me out. So anything that's bigger than me, I'm honestly like freaked out by. So just seeing something.
Thank goodness you're very tall.
I know, right?
I know.
How lucky.
Yeah, but yeah, Limbo, like any kind of game that just makes me feel small and weak and powerless, that's my jam. That is how I can get my fear out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
My question is, how do you appreciate monster media when it also makes you a monster in some of the worst ways possible? Because as a person who's Jewish, vampires often have a very anti-Semitic history, but not a lot of people interrogate that in the monster media they create, and they often perpetuate these harmful stereotypes that hurt people like me.
No, you're right.
I mean, it's a good question. It's really tough, right? I mean, I think you have to find your own boundaries and limits, right? The community is going to have their own, and then you're going to have your own personally. And there's no rule that says you have to engage with things you don't want to, but you should always fight back against the things that are perpetuating those stereotypes and those kinds of things, and be loud and vocal about it.
Because again, it is the speaking to the fish don't know it's water, and something that I've enjoyed is going smaller, certainly in terms of games. There are incredible indie games and things that are made by one or two people, and I think when someone speaks to their personal experience to that level, it's the micro becomes the macro. And you can find really good horror and the really good beginnings of pushing against those narratives and pushing against those ideas. I know it's not a solution to everything, but especially because people will sometimes make the shortest games. I played a game recently where you are, where a witch has put you in a cauldron and you can leave whenever you want, but she's just putting you in there and just talk to her. It's a really nice conversation. You're being boiled alive, but you can leave whenever you want. This is fine.
It also kind of goes back to talking about Vampire in Brooklyn. That was a movie that took the horror black stereotypes and just was like, yeah, we're going to ignore all of that. And we're going to show like the very Eurocentric view of vampires. It took the Eurocentric view of vampires and twisted like, you got to remember, there are other people who are also vampires. And they focused on how African Americans and how the black community view vampires and the story of where they originated from. So it kind of like falls on you. Yes, there are going to be moments where you're going to see a very hurtful narrative, but that means that you got to stand up and say, you know what? Fuck that narrative. I'm going to make my own narrative, and I'm going to make this the new standard that I want everyone to see. Yeah. So it also really falls on you at the end.
And when you find the narratives that get it right or get you right, you celebrate them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to cut it short because we have less than 30 seconds to wrap up.
Take that.
So,
Just
but thank you for your
remember
questions.
that art is all about how you interpret it, and the more you discuss art, the better art's going to get.
Yes, but thank you. The people who had questions, you can come to us.
Yeah.
We'll wait outside.
Over there, yes.
I just want to
We'll hang.
thank you.
afterwards.
Thank you so much for coming to this panel.
Thank you all so much. You are incredible.
I want to give us a really quick chance to wrap up and just say where you can find us. Jeff and I host a podcast called Fun and Games. It's at Fun and Games Pod on literally everything. I'm on Twitter at DJ_Stormageddon. Please come talk to us after the panel. We can spiel, give you all of our plugs, but just I want everyone to quickly say where they can be found online.
Yes, I can be found at Geoff, Geoff, makes noise across most social media platforms.
I am Rachel Quirky everywhere. I also have a little QR code that connects to my link tree, so if you want to get my info, like, Come see me. I'll wink at you like this.
And you can find me on Twitter, WALLE132, like the cute little Disney robot. Like, pretty much, you can just find me with all the stuff that I'm doing. I'm a TTRPG streamer, and I'm in a lot of stuff, so come check me out.
Thank you, everybody, so much for coming.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend at FlameCon.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry.
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not.
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
She will be mine. Aurora.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.